Hey, how's it going guys? Chris here with a bit of a list of some of the most underrated and underused weapons in Battlefield 1. A lot of these guns are ones that don't really get very much love and are often left behind on the shelf. People generally don't use them as much as some of the other more popular weapons, even though they're actually pretty good guns. Especially when you know their strengths and learn how to take advantage of what they do well. I've gone over to BattlefieldTracker.com to see where these guns and weapon variants rank in overall usage, and I can safely say that the ones I've picked are all generally lesser used amongst the Battlefield community, despite them actually being effective choices. So before any smart asses come along and say they've got killed by one of these guns the other day, statistically speaking, these are all weapons and variants that don't get used as much as a whole. I'm not saying that nobody uses them, but more people probably should be doing. So in a way, this video is essentially raising awareness of some of the good guns that are often forgotten about, and encouraging you to put down your Hellriegels and short magazine Lee Enfields to give them another shot. Pardon the pun. So in no particular order, I'm going to start off with a pretty popular weapon with a very unpopular variant, the MP18 Experimental. An assault SMG which is massively overshadowed by the other two variants, the Trench and the Optical. The Experimental fires at the same rate of 550 RPM, deals the same sort of damage, and kills in the same number of bullets, 4 up close and up to 7 further away. The big difference is the fact that it shoots in 3 round bursts as opposed to full auto continuous fire, which might seem like a bit of a drawback on the face of it, but it's actually got a lot of stats that boost the gun's effectiveness over the other variants, having less horizontal recoil to increase accuracy, and having a lower first shot recoil multiplier and less spread whilst aiming and standing still. These are all factors that make the MP18 Experimental a more accurate variant when running and gunning. And although it holds 3 less shots than the Trench and the Optical, with a slightly longer reload when you've run out of bullets, these tiny disadvantages are barely even going to be noticeable as you play. One of the biggest drawbacks to the Experimental is the fact that you can't tap fire the gun to fire individual shots, as you're going to blast out 3 every time you touch the trigger. But just remember that the MP18 is a close-ranged SMG best designed for short-ranged encounters. So if you use the Experimental variant within its optimal range, just like you typically would with the Trench and Optical variants, then you won't have much of a problem landing your shots and taking down your targets. Another assault weapon that's generally forgotten about is the 12G Automatic, which is often left behind in favour of stronger shotgun alternatives like the Model 10A and the M97 Trench gun. It's not hard to see why so many people opt for the more powerful shotguns that are much more likely to put someone down in one blast up close, as they give you unrivaled kill times and make you an almost unstoppable force in a close range situation, giving even the SMG wielders something to fear. But the stronger shotguns all come with slower fire rates and heavier recoil patterns, so if you miss that initial shot, you're less likely to survive to fire your next, with it being trickier to line a second shot up, along with it taking a little bit more time. The 12G Automatic is a much more spammable option where you don't really need to worry about lining up a perfect spread of pellets on your targets to take them down quickly, as in a lot of situations you'll be able to inflict a lot more damage on an enemy in 2 consecutive shots than you would with one blast from a stronger shotgun. And if you're in the thick of the action up on the front lines, then you're more likely to come across enemies that have already been weakened by other players first. So a single blast from the 12G Automatic will often be more than enough to finish them off, and allow you to swiftly move on to your next victim more quickly and easily. So when people think of what scout rifle they're going to use, the majority would typically pick one that's going to dish out a lot of damage over range, which is kind of what scout rifles are generally best at doing. Having one hit kill sweet spot zones set out over different distances help to separate the many choices on offer, but they're all basically quite powerful over most ranges and all sort of do a similar thing to each other. Well, that's where the Russian 1895 Trench variant comes into the scene and plays by different rules, as although it deals a decent amount of damage over distance, it's a lot weaker than the other guns available in the scout selection, to the point where it could take up to 3 hits to take someone down far away, and not deal enough damage to deliver a one-hit kill headshot either, which can seem a bit underwhelming. These are some of the main reasons why the 1895 Trench variant is often neglected, because it doesn't function as a very good long-ranged rifle. But as a medium-range gun for assaulting the enemy team head-on, that Trench variant is usually going to be much more effective than a lot of the others. It's got the quickest fire rate of the bolt-action rifles, shooting over twice as fast as most of the others, and this actually gives it some of the most competitive kill times within those close to medium ranges. So if you're an aggressive player that likes to play closer to all the action, then you'll probably find that the Russian 1895 Trench is a very solid choice to pick. It kills in 2 shots right the way out to 70 meters, and you can snap from target to kill already weakened opponents much more fluidly too. So a more recent variant that was thrown into the mix was the Maschinenpistole P16 Experimental, which is a very different thing to its fully automatic counterpart. The experimental variant kinda snuck into the assault class and never really got much attention when it did. A lot of people just looked at it as a burst-fire version of the Storm variant and never really give the gun much of a chance. But the fact is, the P16 Experimental is a savage beast, especially when you know how it works and how to play to its strengths. The weapon basically acts like a really deadly beefed up sidearm, and although it fires in bursts, it only shoots 2 bullets at a time, so you can manage your ammo a lot easier than with the Storm variant, and learn that you basically got 8 trigger pulls before you'll need to reload. In close quarters, 2 bursts is all it's going to take to drop a target to the floor, and with the P16 Experimental firing so quickly at 1200 RPM, and being more accurate than the Storm variant with a lower horizontal kick and smaller first shot recoil figure, the Experimental variant can be one of the fastest killing weapons in the game, along with it being a surprisingly effective gun for medium ranged encounters too, due to it being easier to aim with. Definitely one of the most overlooked weapons in the assault class. It might not be as simple to use, with it being more of a skill cannon than a spray and pray weapon, but if you're accurate and learn to reload cancel when you're overwhelmed by enemy players, the P16 Experimental can actually be a bloody good gun to use in CQC firefights, dropping targets quicker than you'd probably expect it to. The Selbstlader 1906 has never really had very much love straight from the get-go. It was often dubbed as being one of Battlefield 1's worst weapons when the game first came out, and although it's slowly been improved over time through patches and updates, it's still not exactly a very popular weapon nowadays, despite being a pretty good choice. The main thing that puts people off using the Selbstlader 1906 is probably down to its ammo capacity being so small, as 5 rounds isn't exactly a lot to play around with, meaning you can only reliably take on 1 player at a time before you'll need to shove another stripper clip into the rifle's receiver to continue the fight. And when you're surrounded by a squad of enemies or lighting you up with rapid firing machine guns, it doesn't matter how much skill you've got or how much of a badass you are, there's not exactly very much you can do to counter the attack or survive in those sort of scenarios with a 5-round gun that typically takes 3 rounds to kill. But the Selbstlader 1906 has the lowest horizontal recoil value in the entire medic class, pretty much making it the most accurate medic rifle you can pick, and because it kills in 3 shots over all distances, this gives it some huge potential over those longer ranges, all whilst being able to perform well in one-on-one gunfights up close too. So long as you play with more of a passive-aggressive style, set back slightly away from all the chaos, you'll be able to perform those frequent reloads safely, all whilst picking off targets one by one more reliably than a lot of the other self-loading rifles in the game. Like a few of the other slow-firing LMGs, the Perino 1908 is often left to one side. It doesn't exactly kill extremely quickly, it's got a bit of an obstructive sight in ADS, and well, the thing just looks a bit blocky and ugly. But aesthetics aside, the Perino has quite a lot of hidden qualities to make it a really dependable weapon. It's not only got a really hefty ammo box attached to its side, providing you with loads of bullets to keep you going and going, but these bullets can be replaced quickly and easily without having to go through any long-winded animations that could leave you in a vulnerable position. And because the Perino does fire quite slowly, you're not going to blaze through tons of ammo in the blink of an eye, like you would with the Parabellum or the LMG 0818. It's definitely more of a defensive choice, which is why a lot of people probably don't think to use it, but with it having such a steady recoil pattern, and with it being a pretty easy gun to control and use, this actually makes the Perino one of the best all-rounders that the support class has to offer. It might not kill quite as quickly as some of the other light machine guns, but it's almost always going to have your back, and provide you with more than enough firepower to get you through any situation, so long as you're not too gung-ho with it. Of course, the RSC SMG was always going to make this list, because when it first came out, the gun was massively flawed, hence why barely anyone ever used it. The RSC could kill in 3 bullets up close, but it barely had enough range to make these short distance kill times worthwhile. And to make matters worse, it's got a lot of recoil, only holds 9 rounds at a time, and it takes bloody ages to reload. Not a very good trait for a close quarters weapon to have when you're constantly surrounded by danger up on the front lines. The gun just didn't really have much going for it, with so many better and more dependable options to pick for those offensive playstyles. But once the RSC SMG got its much needed buff that boosted its range and made it a much more competitive weapon, barely anyone noticed. It's still got a fair amount of recoil, and you'll still need to deal with that small ammo capacity and those lengthy reloads, but it's a hell of a lot more useful now, putting players down more reliably, and generally being a pretty fun skill cannon to bring along to the fight. That actually lets you take on enemies a bit further away better than quite a lot of the other submachine guns, due to its bullets hitting harder than average further away. If you're one of those guys that tried the RSC SMG when it first got released, hated it and never used it again, then I'd definitely suggest giving it another go. You might be pleasantly surprised. Now, the CEI-RIGOTTI might not seem like an underrated weapon, but the fact is, a lot of people aren't really using it anymore, as they've moved on to newer, more powerful rifles and basically left the gun behind without picking it back up. It's often seen as one of those starter weapons that's available right from the beginning, which quickly gets forgotten about as more guns get unlocked over time, and statistics show that it's one of the less common semi-automatic rifles being used these days in Battlefield 1, which is a bit weird considering how well-rounded and deadly it actually is. The CEI-RIGOTTI might not be able to deliver the most damage over those longer distances, but generally it's one of the most versatile medic weapons in the game, having a nice 10 round ammo capacity, manageable recoil, decent kill times out to those medium ranges, clean looking iron sights, and with it just being a weapon that can get you through a lot of gunfights without any issues. It might not be anything new or flashy, but the CEI-RIGOTTI shouldn't be underestimated, as it gets the job done. It can kill quicker over close to medium ranges than quite a lot of other rifles, like the M1916, Farquhar Hill, Mondragon, Howell Rifle, M1907 SL, and even the Fedorov Automat. And despite dealing a lower amount of damage over longer distances, and taking an extra shot to kill, the CEI-RIGOTTI's still got some pretty respectable kill times here too, which are made more accessible with the gun being quite easy to control, and with it having enough ammo to take on several enemies at a time too. The M1917 Trench and Patrol Carbine variants are both pretty rare weapons to get killed by. A lot of assault players are going to prefer a gun that can blast out a load of bullets all at once in fully automatic, rather than having to manually tap the trigger to fire enough individual shots to kill their targets, which I guess could seem to be a bit more effort. Although the M1917 deals more CQC damage than the average assault gun, therefore killing in one less round up close, its overall kill times aren't really all that impressive, and because it fires at the slow rate of just 360 RPM, this often makes it seem like a less suitable weapon for actually advancing on enemy positions and fighting opponents head on, which is generally what the assault class is designed to do best. For these reasons, a lot of people don't really bother with the gun, as why choose a slow firing semi-automatic when you can wield a rapid firing bullet hose that can take people out a lot quicker and easier in CQC? Well, the fact is, the M1917 might not kill as effectively, but it's got one of the best recoil patterns in the business, allowing it to perform better further away over those medium ranges, as you'll likely be able to land more shots, providing you're accurate enough, which is often the downfall of the quicker firing SMGs that are often prone to miss. It's not exactly a bad weapon up close, and so it's still a pretty good choice for offensive tactics, especially if you're good at flanking, as you'll have a lot of ammo to keep you going, along with some fairly snappy reloads to make sure you don't get caught out behind enemy lines. One of the least used light machine guns in Battlefield 1 is the Madsen MG, which might come as a bit of a surprise because the Madsen's one of those guns you'd probably expect to be fairly popular. The trench and low weight variants are amongst the lowest used LMGs in the game, and the Storm variant's not exactly too far behind either. The Madsen deals a decent amount of damage and has a quicker fire rate than a lot of the other support weapons, with it only being 60 RPM behind the LMG 0818. The gun's got a fairly steady recoil pattern, holds enough bullets to kill a few enemies, and has a faster than average tactical reload speed than pretty much all of the other light machine guns. Not to mention the reduced hipfire spread that the trench variant has, or the faster recoil decrease rate that the low weight variant has. So why the hell is the Madsen MG barely being used? I suppose a lot of people are put off by that awkward top-loaded magazine shoved into the gun's head that juts out and blocks off a huge chunk of the screen. There's no denying that it gets in the way and can even be a bit of a distraction sometimes. But if you can learn to ignore the magazine and focus on all the stuff happening in front of it, you've actually got yourself a really well-rounded gun that can deal with most situations quite well. When it comes to underrated weapons, the General Liu rifle stands out as an obvious choice, because on the face of it, the gun just doesn't really seem all that special. It can kill in 3 shots over all ranges when using its standard semi-automatic mode, which is all well and good, but quite a few other weapons with higher ammo capacities or lower recoil patterns can also do this too, like the M1916, Mondragon and Selbstlader 1906. In a way, it's a very similar rifle to the Selbstlader 1906, another somewhat underrated, underused weapon, in the sense that it's got the same kill times and can perform reasonably well over all distances, so long as you can land your shots. It might not be as accurate as the 1906 rifle, but it holds an extra round to compensate. And let's not forget about the fact that the General Liu rifle can now switch over to a bolt action mode to deal higher amounts of damage at the expense of firing slower. This basically gives the General Liu some very similar stats to the Gavir 98, dealing the same damage over range and even having the same one-hit kill sweet spot zone, transforming it into an almost completely different thing altogether. So in a way, you've essentially got yourself 2 guns for the price of 1, being able to switch between firing modes on the fly to cater for both shorter and longer range fights whenever you need to, something none of the other medic rifles are capable of doing. And last but not least is the M1903 Experimental. Bet you're not massively surprised to see this one here. The M1903 Experimental's been hiding in the Scout class as the underdog for quite a while. Maybe down to it being fairly weak in comparison to some of the other guns in the game, or maybe down to it functioning in a completely different way to all the other Scout weapons, being more of a close to mid-range gun than a long-distance sniping machine. Statistically, the gun plays out in a very similar way to the M1917 Carbine for the Assault class, with them both holding 41 rounds, dealing the same damage, having the same range, killing in the same number of shots, and both even firing at the same rate too in semi-automatic, giving them loads of identical properties that can often make the guns feel like complete clones of each other. But of course, they do have their own subtle differences that separate them apart. And the M1903 Experimental's got even less recoil than the M1917, which might allow you to land more shots on target further away, possibly making it seem like a slightly better weapon for mid-ranged encounters. Whereas the M1917 has better hipfire or ADS spread bonuses depending on the variant. You could go as far as to say the M1903 Experimental is essentially like a Storm variant of the M1917, but the fact is it can be a surprisingly effective gun for chipping away health within those offensive distances. And because it does have an extremely low amount of recoil, this makes it all the easier to use when spamming the trigger, and landing enough bullets on target to kill. So there we have it folks, a load of underrated guns in Battlefield 1 that I suggest you go back and try again if you fancy using something a bit different. They're all pretty good weapons once you master them, and learn how to take advantage of what they do best, and they all definitely deserve a bit more attention. I hope you enjoyed the video, thumbs up if you did, and subscribe for loads more Battlefield content coming soon right here on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next episode.